Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Is It Fun podcast. I'm Greg. I'm with Trip here. Say hello, Trip.
No.
Okay, good. Today we're going to kind of do a special thing. Generally, we talk about games on this channel a whole lot, which are all near and dear to our heart. But we want to talk about something that's also near and dear to our heart today. We're going to talk about the Cosmere and the author that is responsible for said universe, Brandon Sanderson. So this is just going to be a deep dive into this. I will say halfway through we'll be talking about some spoilers, so I will give an alert to that. So any of you that are interested in reading it but don't want spoilers, they can cut off at that point. But to get started, we'll just talk about what is it. So Trip, why don't you give us a rundown of the Cosmere, Brandon Sanderson?
So apparently, by original design, Mr. Sanderson has come up with multiple settings for his books, right? Like he has 3, 4, 5, 6 different, currently probably way more than that I'm not thinking of, different series of books that are set in literally different planets, different worlds. So you have these different, systems in place on each of these planets, different, it's a different planet, so it's different environment, different people, different races, different cultures, different blah, blah, different magic systems, most importantly, for the reader, the people who enjoy fantasy or whatever. Like that's what kind of the entire world, that's the nexus point, that's the fulcrum, that's what the entire world rotates on, and the stories rotate around this magic system that is unique to each of the different worlds, mostly. So essentially, instead of basically like most authors will have like this series set here, this series set on this planet, this completely different world, completely different time or whatever, Brandon Sanderson has an entire universe set up with these worlds, around different stars or whatever that are still happening in the same reality, essentially. And there's different ways for them to interconnect, either by physical movement from planet to planet, which I don't know that he's actually going to try and advance the technology that far, or kind of more behind the scenes movements that can happen through the magic system.
So essentially he took his writing style, which was writing epic high fantasy.
Yep.
And he wrote a couple of different trilogies.
Yep.
And he wrote a couple of one-offs.
Yep.
And then he said, you know what? Surprise, all of these are in the same universe.
And as much as I want to say, whatever, that's crap, he didn't think of that to begin with, he's just trying to tie him in later on. He has had a consistent character throughout. There's been a character that's appeared in, so far, I believe, every book in one form or another. I believe in a couple of books, I'm sorry, let's say series, rather, because they don't so there's some books he doesn't in any way appear in, but he does, appear throughout the series at one point in time, maybe.
Mm.
And a couple of that I can think of, he's merely mentioned. They'll say, "Oh, I met this person previously outside of the scope of this particular story," and just as a reference. But yeah, there's a consistent character throughout.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit before we dig into the Cosmere, and we're going to get pretty deep into this. But let's talk a little bit about Brandon Sanderson for those who may not be familiar with him. So he is a fantasy author that is also an English teacher, I believe.
I believe creative writing teacher.
Creative writing teacher, correct. He's been writing, his first book was published in 2005, and it was Elantris.
Yep.
He's won multiple awards between then and now, including Hugo's for Best Novella, Fictional Works, Goodreads Awards, Whitney Awards. So he's been very rewarded and promoted, yeah.
Yep.
From a lot of his writing. And a lot of what people might know him for is he got tapped to write the final 3 books of the Wheel of Time series, which was originally authored by Robert Jordan.
Yep.
So, I was already reading his stuff before that. And so when that announcement was made, I was just amazed and super excited. Turns out he did a really great job. But for a lot of people that weren't familiar with him at that point, they saw his name on these books and was like, I should go check him out. Yep. And then they get to go read the catalog of his work. And so he's really skyrocketed. I think even now considered probably one of the most popular fantasy authors that's around.
Absolutely, but it still stuns me whenever I meet someone who enjoys fantasy novels but has never read Brandon Sanderson. Still
Yeah,
blows my mind. But yeah, you still meet weirdos who are like that. And some of you might be weirdos who are like that. But yeah, for many people, sadly, Wheel of Time was their introduction. Him finishing Wheel of Time was their introduction to Brandon Sanderson. And he spoke at length about what great respect he had for Robert Jordan and what an opportunity this was and everything. But yeah, 2005 was when I first started reading him, and I actually began with the Mistborn series. But yeah.
great. Through his masterworks, I guess you could say, and I use that term as in his potential to complete all these books, right?
Okay.
Supposedly, this Cosmere cycle will include 32 to 36 books. That's obviously, could change, but that's a pretty ambitious project.
It's a huge project. It's one of those things where you hear someone doing that, you love what's happened so far, and you just hope for his help. Like you hope nothing happens to the guy.
Right. Yeah.
And that can't include some of the novellas he's written. I bet he doesn't even consider that as far as one of the books or whatever. The novellas, the short stories, all that stuff. Which his short stories are the size of some people's entire books. So yeah.
Yeah, and so knowing that is his goal, 32 some odd books, right? And obviously there are concerns about worrying about how long is it going to take and will he be able to finish all this stuff. That kind of brings me back to a point about him as an author, is that he is probably the most tireless writer that I've ever experienced as a reader, as a fan.
Yeah, he is prolific as hell. His break from writing is writing something else.
Yeah.
The way he cools down from a long writing session is to write something unrelated to what he was writing. So yeah.
And that's quite the contrast to some of the other popular fantasy writers right now, like take George R.R. Martin, for example, where people are just chomping at the bits for the next book.
Yep.
And he's like, working on it. I mean, Brandon Sanderson has given me, since 2005, there has been at least one, if not two books or more every year.
Yep.
I think since then. Right.
Yep, I think that's right. I mean, he always has something coming out. It might not be exactly what we were wanting from him, but he comes out with something, and it's at the very least enjoyable. I think he's come out with some work that isn't amazing as some of the stuff that I really want to hear want from him. Which is Stormlight Archive or whatever. I can't talk, not a big deal. But he'll come out with something unrelated, but it's still good. It's still enjoyable work. So yeah.
Yeah. So, so he's written some young adult stuff, right? And he's written this high fantasy stuff. And I think that's the two genres he focuses mostly on. But after reading a lot of his young adult stuff, which would be the Reckoners series, I think Alcatraz falls into that.
Yep. Alcatraz is probably younger than young adult, but it's still young person.
Yeah, a wide range of stuff, and even those are enjoyable to me. So he will tend to alternate one big high fantasy book and then one young adult or young person book, and then kind of pace himself out like that. But there's always something coming out. So as a reader, as a fan, I find it easy to follow him and stay excited about his work because I'm always getting something. I'm never dry for 2 years or 3 years, right? So two quick more points before we get into heavy spoilers. What type of person would enjoy reading the Cosmere novels?
I think there's got to be a giant range just from reading the forums or whatever. You see people from all walks of life enjoying his work. Of course, if you're not into fantasy, if you find yourself enthralled with a dry rerun of historical text or whatever, this might not be for you. But my mom, I gave her one of his books or whatever, and she enjoyed it and thought it was great. And so anyone, I think, my mom normally reads mystery and James Patterson and Danielle Steele type stuff is what my mom enjoys. So, right. I think anyone can really enjoy it. But, the people who would listen to this podcast most likely would really be what he'd be aiming at. Like if you have that portion of your brain labeled anime is larger than average, then you're absolutely going to love his work. He really has like a great grasp of action in his novels. I think it's not at all the only part of it, don't get me wrong, but he definitely has a firm grasp of that.
Cool. And so last note here, you can find all of these books, and we will talk about the specific books coming up, but you can find all these books on Kindle, Audible, in bookstores, on the interwebs, wherever. I mean, this is not hard to find this stuff. I recommend starting off with Elantris because it's a one-off story, just the book itself. You can read it to get an idea of the style of writing. And if you enjoy that, then I would move on to Mistborn. And some people even say start with Mistborn because it's kind of one of his better presentations.
Yep. It was what I started with, but yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So if you're still listening and you want to read this, please turn this off now. Go do all the reading in the world. The rest of the stuff we're going to be talking about is spoilers directly to the series. If you've read everything already and like to hear our opinions about it, then please continue listening. So I'll give everyone 1 second to turn off the things.
1 single second.
Yeah. All right. So spoilers are out of the way. So let's go over the main series that are involved in the Cosmere and the worlds they're associated with, as we know.
Sure.
So there is the Elantris series, which is based in the world of Cell.
Okay. Yep.
And my pronunciations will vary here. I'm not saying they're going to be perfect.
Well, that's pretty easy. That's SEL, right?
Yeah, but you never know.
Real tough to fuck that one up, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There's Elantris and the Emperor's Soul are both based in Cell.
Right. Then you have the Warbreaker series,
which is standalone, no related novels to that world.
Correct, and that's based in the world of Nalthus.
Okay. Yep.
Then there's the Mistborn series.
Yes.
And that is 3-6, depending on how you want to look at it.
I believe it. What do you mean? Like the number that we have of it?
Yeah. So there's the first 3.
Yeah.
And then there's the post 3.
Okay. Well, remember
Or
it was
4.
supposed to be a series of 9. Is I believe how he originally sold it to the publisher or whatever. And we got the first 3 already as the actual Mistborn, what's standardly called the Mistborn series or whatever. And then he was going to have the second 3 be set in modern times, and then the third 3 be set in the futuristic times. So he came up with the idea of what is now the second 3 or 4 now, I think, or whatever, like to be set in like Wild West type of times, almost steampunkish. It feels, as you read it or whatever, because they're just getting like the gaslight type thing set up. Yeah, so like Wild West, steampunk, whatever, like that is not originally a part of the 9. So that's like between the first and second series technically. And he wrote like the first book of that as almost like a prequel book to the real set of 3 that are supposed to be in. So yeah, so it's just apparently like I think we're looking at closer to 13 right now for the Mistborn series, not including the novella that was released. What's it called? Secret Histories or whatever?
Secret Histories, yeah.
So yeah, so 13 and a half.
so plenty of books in the Mistborn series, and all those are based in the world of Scadrial.
Scadrial, yeah.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm mentioning these world names is because the Cosmere is founded based on worlds that are in, solar systems, that are in galaxies, et cetera, right? So
yep.
These are merely just points of reference. So the Mistborn series. Then we have the Stormlight Archives, which is, I think he's even said, like his primary high fantasy series.
That
right?
Well, he's mentioned that, but I almost want to say Dragonsteel is supposed to be the primary.
Okay.
Primary. Like I think, obviously I believe he has a lot of love in the Stormlight Archive, and that's currently, to me, the most exciting stuff he's coming out with. It's the largest, grandest series he has, but he's mentioned Dragonsteel, I believe, as being another like true series that he wants to do based around Hoyt, the character that appears across all the Cosmere novels.
Yeah, we will talk a bit more about him in just a second, but okay. And then the Stormlight Archive is based on the world of Roshar. There's currently 2 books out. The third book comes out this year in November.
So Supposedly, yeah.
Supposedly. Just kind of as a side note for listeners, the amount that he writes in the Stormlight Archive, all of his books have good length to them. Like they're comfortable length for me, enough to get interested, but not so much that they run on. The Stormlight Archive, this most recent revision, I think it's called Oathbreaker, right? The third book?
Yes.
Clocked in at something like 460,000 words.
Sure.
And to kind of compare, the Words of Radiance, which is the second book, clocked in about 400.
Okay.
And the entire Lord of the Rings clocks in at like, I think it was 320,000.
Oh, okay. Words. All right. I was going to say 260, but yeah. All right.
Yeah, 260 may be more accurate, yeah. But anyway, just to kind of give some scope, right? Like these are massive novels.
Well, I mean, anyone who's read his work with Wheel of Time. Yeah, Wheel of Time stuff he's like he has no problem writing the absolute crap out of a book, you know. So yeah, he writes some big stuff, but the Mistborn are slightly smaller compared to the Stormlight Archive.
Easier to digest, and you know,
if you're wanting to start with small bites, yeah, that's going to be the way to go. But yeah.
Okay, and then we have the White Sands, or White Sand, and that's the world of Taldane.
Okay. Which I didn't even. This is where I get really foggy because I'm not even sure about like the names of some of these worlds. But yeah, White Sands, I believe, is almost exclusively a graphic novel series right now. Like the first set has been released. It's fine. I've read it and everything. In all honesty, that kind of comes across as a little young adult to me.
Sure.
I don't believe it's because it's in the graphic novel format, though. That is, I'm like second guessing myself because okay, you're seeing some drawn pictures, you think that's more young adult, but really like the writing is more basic. The dialogue comes across as more basic, but I believe it was one of his earlier series that he worked on when he was younger, and this is like when he goes back and rewrites it, and we get this version of it or whatever. So I do feel like it's a bit younger, maybe aimed a bit younger than some of his other stuff is. Now, in his collection that he wrote, have you finished the collection yet? The most recent thing?
Arcanum Unbounded, I think.
Yep. So yeah, there's a version of the first part of the White Sands story that's written there, of course. But yeah, I believe generally this is supposed to be graphic novel format for this particular series. Yeah.
So does that cover all the main series that are involved in the Cosmere as of now?
You did Warbreaker, Mistborn, Stormlight Archive. No, there's the Dead Planet. I don't even know if that really counts, but it's the one that's lost its Arcanum. Sixth of Dusk, and Shadows of Silence in the Forest of Hell.
Okay, right.
Which I don't remember about that one at all, but yeah.
So
there's potentially two more, but yeah.
So there's a lot then, just to say the least. Now, I will say now I'm just going to get completely into speculation in my own opinion, but so as I was reading through these, I found that these were completely enjoyable all on their own. Like you could completely ignore the fact that we're talking about the Cosmere and all the different ways these things tie in together. But just reading them as regular books, even Warbreaker, which is the one-off, and Elantris, like completely enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about it. The Cosmere aspect of it is 98% optional. You know, just ignore the hell out of it if you want to. It doesn't matter. But if you want to think about how all these worlds tie together, how the magic systems tie together, how the grand powers that are present on each of these planets as gods or however you want to, whatever filter you want to view them through or whatever, like, those are just add fun. They add depth. They add background and history to the stories.
Mm-hmm.
But they're optional.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think I read Elantris, Mistborn series, what was available then, Warbreaker, and I didn't have any idea that the Cosmere even existed.
I believe Hoyd was mentioned more than once, and I was like, that name sounds familiar. Didn't he use that in another book? That's lazy. And then I started realizing that this stuff was all more tied together because, I read a forum somewhere where someone was talking about it, or he announced it or something was made more present about it. And so that's kind of when I got way more interested in that and started reading up on it. Which, by the way, there's a couple really awesome resources for people interested in reading up on this, which is the 17th Shard, which is a reader-run forum. And there's also BrandonSanderson.com where he's pretty hefty with updates on there.
He does a good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he even has like writing progress in the upper right hand corner, so you can
Which
constantly
is,
see.
yep, which is, you can stalk the hell out of him to see whether he's working on your favorite book or not.
Are
But yeah,
you in line this month? Okay, good. Right.
yeah,
Like, okay, cool. So I think I want to just talk a little bit about each series on a personal level, and just kind of get your, I don't know, 5 minute review of something. So let's say,
absolutely.
yeah, let's do Elantris. Let's and we can even get kind of into a little bit of detail here, because I think all the spoilers are out. But how was Elantris for you? What did you take from it?
Elantris I thought was really interesting. Honestly, that was one of the very first books from him that I read. I read the very first Mistborn book, then I read Elantris, then I read the rest of the Mistborn series. So Elantris was kind of like a weird like stopgap between the entire Mistborn series for me. But my memory of it isn't as pure as I'd like, but it was really interesting. Again, it was one of his first works. So one of his very first, and I say one of his because he wrote quite a number of books before ever getting published, right?
Yeah.
So like some of these like were completed, in one form or another, and then he started publishing, and maybe the first thing he got published wasn't the first book he wrote by any means. But Elantris I thought was very interesting. It was particularly striking to me because the magic system, the whole reason I get into fantasy at all, wasn't ostensibly active, in place, interesting, a grasping point for me, something that drew me in until near the very end of the book, when it actually came into play. Like it was
Mhm.
having an effect on the world, a very obvious effect on the world, but it wasn't an active magic system until very near the end of the book.
Yeah.
So it was almost like drab and dreary for a good portion of the book. Like there was a lot more political stuff than you would really expect to happen. Like there was a very strong female character, which I always appreciate. I think he does. I think he does well with strong female characters generally. And so that was interesting to me. But yeah, like
Yeah.
he has solid humor. I think it's really neat. I think sometimes writers try too hard and it comes across as like whatever. But yeah,
Yeah. Kind of as a segue, we have the Elantris strong female lead, Mistborn strong female lead, Warbreaker strong female lead,
two strong female leads.
two strong female leads. Stormlight, there's at least three or four.
Yep.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job.
He doesn't shy away from that sort of thing, but it's not like they're solely in the spotlight at all. Like you can, I think Ed Greenwood probably goes over the top, focusing too much on female characters in the lead or whatever, perhaps. But I don't get that sense with Brandon Sanderson. I think he has a really good balance. I think it's if feminism is your take on it, I think he has a really good balance.
Yeah, and it's something that I never really notice while I'm reading them, right?
Yep.
Like, let's take, for example, Wheel Time, something I read through and really enjoyed, really appreciate the whole saga, right? But I would, like mentally note while I was reading that of all of the main characters, like there were certain portions of certain books where most of the male characters would be ignored and you would just focus on, go off on this one whole tangent, right?
Yeah.
And then you'd get a little bit more, and then it would bounce back and forth, and sometimes you'd go off on this whole long tangent with the male characters, and so the flow of the novel sometimes felt spiky, or
Yeah.
not novel, but the whole series, right?
Yeah.
But with all of these books, I just feel like he's saying what needs to be said to pace the story. There's no, I'm going to go talk about this character because I haven't talked about him in a while.
Sure.
It's this needs to be talked about because it moves the plot forward.
Pacing is absolutely something that I think he has a great grasp of. A lot of people will state, oh, well, there's like 80% plodding along and then 20% giant payoff for Brandon Sanderson. And I personally, I read that and I can see how someone would think that, but I've never experienced that myself because the minutia I think he does so incredibly well. Because it's all character development and not just like, oh, she's becoming emotionally stronger as a person. The characters get more skilled. Their eyes open more to different possibilities and such things. So like the character development also happens in a very like literal way. Like they become better fighters, they become better magic users, they become better blah blah blah. So yeah, like that sort of thing is fun for me to read. Like I like the same reason people loved Harry Potter. He goes to school and he develops in this magical world or whatever himself and his skills and everything, and that's something that's fun to read. It's the kid in a magic school thing. Which,
Harry Potter.
is is incredible. Don't do that. Is incredibly common. Like in anime and Harry Potter and everything. Yeah. So and I think that's enjoyable from that standpoint as well.
Yeah. So before we get into some of the other ones, I think, and this is due to my fault of just assuming everyone has knowledge and not expressing it, but so the Cosmere, just to give kind of a brief overview, was created when the one being, and I'm going to mispronounce this,
Go nuts.
Adolnalsium.
Not even close. Go on.
Okay.
Just kidding. That's fine.
there is a supreme entity. Well, I won't even say being, but just something.
Yep.
And some things split its powers apart.
Yep.
Into 16 shards.
Yep.
And each shard traveled and ended up landing on one of these planets.
Now, was that the way it was, or was it that the shards were immediately claimed by a human host?
Could have been, yeah.
Okay. My understanding was that at the time of the shattering, there was someone present, either by design or by accident, that was able to assume the power of these shards. And then they, with that power, which was quite a big amount, then split up or went their mostly separate ways, 3 to one planet, 2 to another planet, 1 to one planet. They split up.
Yeah. So either via human host or however it happened, but these shards made their way to these planets.
Yep.
And these planets are where these series take place.
Yep.
And you'll notice, like, for example, when you're reading Mistborn, it starts off with the minutia. You're like, okay, here's some characters living on this world, and here's the magic system that exists here, and that's interesting, and here's the political climate of the world. But then you realize that behind the scenes, all of this is being driven by these shards and who's holding the power of these shards.
Exactly.
And how the balance of power exists. Because remember, all these were one, and now that they've split off, some of them are constantly vying for power against one another. Like I think in the Mistborn series, we've got Preservation Shard and Ruin Shard. Yep. So these are constantly battling against each other to create a wholesome world, right?
Yep. Yes. Somewhat wholesome, but yeah.
Yeah. And then in Roshar, you have, I think there's 3 in Roshar?
There should be 3 on Roshar. I want to say Honor, Cultivation, and Odium.
Odium, right. Which would be Hate or whatever. The big baddie, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the big baddies. But yeah, so all of these shards are kind of working behind the scenes. Like I remember the first, the prologue of the Way of Kings, and it describes, there's these heralds, and they are, every so many hundreds of years they have to fight off the desolation.
Yep.
And you're like, wow, that's so cool. And who are these heralds? And, how does this all work out? But really, it's like, these shards, these 2 powers are causing this situation, but even the characters don't know, and they have to find out along the way, just like you do.
Exactly. One of the awesome things about it is that, like, you don't get this, you don't have this. We've talked about Dark Souls being the type of story that it gives you is not implicit at all. It's not explicit at all. It's, you have to search for it. You have to put things together or whatever, and that's part of the fun of his series, is that a lot of the stuff isn't explained to you. You'll get bits and pieces here and there, and people on the forums are way better at putting it all together than I am, because I just go on there and read what they've come up with. But like, you can make your own connections sometimes, and you're like, oh, that's why Hoyd went here after he went here, because he had to wait for this to happen and blah blah. But so it's really very fascinating the way he's done it all.
And that is like one of the huge parts that people are fascinated with, is this Hoyd character, which is what they call a world hopper.
One of the many.
One of the many. And he is, like you said before, in every book at some point, in every series at some point.
Yep.
He has a pretty large role in the Stormlight Archive, actually, I think.
He does.
Compared to his other roles, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, for instance, in the Emperor's Soul, he gets a bland mention at the very beginning of the book, as like he betrayed the main character at some point in time.
Yeah.
And
And some of the theories, and I'm not sure about this in any way, but some people say that he holds a shard. Some people say that he has a bit of confusing foresight, right? So, like, he can see where he needs to be in the Cosmere, but doesn't know why he needs to be there. So he'll show up at a place and just be like, "What am I doing here?"
Yeah, like he can. It's like he can tell when things are about to change. He can tell when things are about to happen, and apparently once he gets there, he knows which levers to pull, but he doesn't always know why he's going there to begin with, or something.
Yeah.
Which has been pretty evident based on his actions in past books. He has been a source of wisdom for some characters. He has been a antagonist to other characters, and he obviously has some goal in mind, but we have no clue what it is at all right now. Like he could be trying to get a shard. He could be in possession of a shard and working based on its impetus. He could be trying to prevent the wrong people from getting shards. We don't know, and that's what's interesting, because it's a mystery, and we love mysteries, and it's a huge mystery.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I guess that kind of needs a little bit of a modifier, just saying that in Brandon Sanderson's books and his universe, there's 3 levels of reality, right? There's the physical realm, the cognitive realm, which is called Shadesmar, and then the spiritual realm.
I guess, yeah, I'm not that one. I've never been as sure about, just because I feel like we've seen the physical realm as the book's mainly written in that form. We've seen the cognitive realm in bits and pieces. But the spiritual realm, I think most of the hidden mysteries or secret mysteries of Mistborn or whatever takes place in the spiritual realm. But that's the first and only place it's addressed, as far as I can tell. It's mentioned in other books, but it's not ever dealt with in other books, I guess.
Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up was because that is a theory of how Hoyd travels between these worlds, as he uses the cognitive realm, Shadesmar, and travels between these different things. I don't know. I mean, of course, that's all just theory, but
sure. I mean, like, physical distance is a measurable distance, and maybe the cognitive and the distances in the cognitive and spiritual realm isn't as clear cut as that, and more traversable by someone. But I mean, there's just a huge amount to talk about. Points of power, like the well in Mistborn, and like shard possession in the groups that want to possess those shards, and like what powers they convey, and shards can combine and form different greater shards and dead shards and blah blah blah. I mean, there's a huge amount to talk about. But yeah, like, Hoyd is going to be the tying force, and I'm sure we'll get more and more and more and more revealed on him as time goes by.
Yeah, and like who he's working for, if anyone, or if he's solely self-interested, and how he came to this knowledge. And the 17th Shard, which is the group that supposedly is chasing down, gathering these shards, right?
I didn't know they had a name like that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what the site's named after. So
okay.
But yeah, there's tons of stuff. So, we're obviously not going to deep dive into all of this stuff, but needless to say, it is a complex, very enjoyable, at least to me anyway, experience to go through.
Yeah, it's just so, that is just like the part that I love, like, you can read the books, and the books are awesome, but the underlying mystery, it's what draws me back. It's what makes me ask questions. It's what really inspires me to want to know more and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a very unique idea. Now, I'm not saying he's the first one to come up with something like this, but I was used to reading the standard canon fantasy, high fantasy, right?
Yeah.
You get, either a trilogy, or you get an author that goes, I'm going to write as many as I can.
Yep.
Which usually ends about 10 or so. You're David Farland, who just keeps writing random books all on the way, and maybe they tie in, maybe they don't. But yeah, and so once I was used to reading those, and I started kind of understanding what he's done here, it was like wildly appreciated by me. So now I can read any series of books from him and know that there's little bits and pieces that are progressing my mystery. with the overarching thing.
Exactly. There's like these little points that are tying into other points, and you know to look out for those, which adds another layer to the book. It adds another layer to reading the book. Like I've reread books from him and noticed stuff that I didn't notice before that were tie-ins to other universes or whatever.
Yep.
Which I thought was very exciting. But yeah.
So in summation, go pick up the Mistborn series, the original one. Start there. Pick up Elantris. Pick up Warbreaker. It's even really great. Hey, even just start with the Reckoner series, right? If you just want a nice, easy read that you can read in like a weekend, those are easy, quick books to read.
Yeah, I will say I don't think Reckoner is a part of that, though. I don't think it's a Cosmere novel, is it?
Oh, no,
Okay.
It's not. No, I'm just saying just to kind of get their feet wet if they've never read any Brandon Sanderson, you could start there and kind of
just making sure.
Get a feel for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love Olive or whatever, but yeah, it's really tough to say where to start because my initial thought is Stormlight Archive is the best. Go read Stormlight Archive, but it's a big book. It's a big series. It's a lot of time. So to kind of dip your toe in, see if you like the water or whatever, I would probably start with the Mistborn series.
Yeah, and to be fair, it doesn't matter which order you read these in. You're not going to be missing anything.
Absolutely not. No, I mean,
so read whichever one that sparks your interest, right?
I mean, obviously order within each series, but series-wise, it doesn't matter which book you read.
Yeah, I mean, you could just never have read anything by him. Pick up Way of Kings, Stormlight Archive Book 1, and enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I thought, I think it's really easy to enjoy his work. His style of writing, I think it's important to mention, is it's kind of tough to explain. It's like he's good. He has funny moments. He doesn't do a lot with wordplay. He doesn't like it's not like lyrical prose or anything. But he writes in such a way that his words absolutely get out of the way of telling you the story. Like the words aren't. It's tough to explain without almost making it sound bad. The words aren't noticeable. You don't think about the words he's using. You listen to the story type of thing. So, which I think is really important for storytelling, and he does a great job with that.
Absolutely. All right, so this year, look for Oathbreaker, and while you're sitting there waiting on that, read all the other books.
Just read every other book.
just go back and read all the books.
Yep.
And then let us know. I think we'll do if there's a lot of interest, and we'll wait and see on this. But I think we will do like a breakdown of each series and kind of talk about them individually. It'll give us a lot more time to delve into the details and opinions on the way he took certain novels and the story itself and stuff like that. I think that'd be good.
Sure, absolutely. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Go check out Brandon Sanderson and the Cosmere, and have a good one.